So, hello everyone, and welcome to our Work Well Live webinar. We're discussing career opportunities in the area of workplace well-being. So, thanks to everyone for joining. Huge thanks to our guests today. So, on the call, we have Sharon Daly. So, Sharon is still lots of people joining, which is fantastic. Sharon is the Program Manager for Health and Wellbeing at Iarnrod Éireann, Irish Rail. We also have Tomas Quinn. Tomas is a workplace wellbeing professional, lecturer, and researcher, and he's head of wellbeing solutions, education, and research at TikTok. Sharon, can we kick off with yourself? Would you like to maybe introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your own career journey and what has got you to this place.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, lovely to see everybody. I'm like astounded that there's this many people interested. And I see one or two of my colleagues. I'm like, surely you know everything there is. They're obviously here for you, Tomas. um, but lovely to see everybody. I recognize some of the names there as well. So good to see you all. Yeah, so I started my career in UCD. I did a BCom, so commerce degree. And then I went into marketing. I did a master's in marketing in Smurfit. And what I didn't realize at the time, even though I probably should have, but I did my thesis on food marketing and its effects on children. But that wasn't obvious enough for me in terms of where I wanted to be in terms of work. So I worked in marketing in Bord Gáis for a couple of years. I was on the graduate program and then kind of stayed on for a while and loved it, really enjoyed the work I was doing there. But I knew it wasn't the career path for me. There was something missing. So I kind of dabbled a bit in terms of the health space. So I did an evening course on personal training, nutrition, and a few other modules as well, just to test the water. And I loved it. It was brilliant. I enjoyed every minute of it. And decided then that to kind of look around and see where would I find my space and to kind of bring some of the skills that I had developed and enjoyed from the marketing side of things. So went back to college, went down to Galway for a year, down to NUIG, and did a postgrad in health promotion down there, and got some work placement with the Heart Foundation, then took a role there working on their Selena Sláinte program. And then quickly realised that there wasn't much going on in Ireland at the time in terms of health promotion. And was kind of blue in the face having to tell everybody what I did for work. It's like, I nearly want to just tell them I'm an accountant because it's a one-word answer. It's 20 minutes later and still be explaining what that means. But anyway, it was all good. But I did some interviews for some jobs in Australia in the middle of the night, November time, 3 o'clock in the morning, applied for a role at Sydney University, and I got it. So I worked with New South Wales Health and Sydney University on a project working with Aboriginal communities around smoking cessation, which was fascinating and an amazing experience. And then did a few other pieces while I was over there as well, but that was the main one. And yeah, got some great experience. I said, really interesting role. Then came back to Ireland, and thankfully at the time, particularly, most of the people working in health promotion were female. So they all went to have babies, and I covered a few maternity leave contracts, which was great. So I was in the Heart Foundation again for another bit. And then I a contract to kind of temporary contract, or what you call them, those kind of short contracts with very like project work, came up with the Cancer Society. So applied for that, the Irish Cancer Society. And that was fascinating. I was involved in developing the Fit for Work and Life program there, and doing lots of community programs as well, which was really, really interesting. And then at the same time, so that was kind of a couple of hours, depending on when the projects were running. And then at the same time, a role came up with the National Transport Authority to run their walking and cycling challenges. So that's what started off as, and then it grew over time. So I said, "Oh, Grant, that'll be great. I'll enjoy that. Get into the physical activity side of things," and then realised I needed to be self-employed to do it. So I became self-employed, and that was about as much thought that went into becoming self-employed, because the tender was due about 2 days later. So I had to pivot. And I ended up being self-employed for about 9 years, working on various contracts. But it gave me great opportunities to work in different areas. So I wrote a module around behaviour change for NUIG and delivered that. I did more and more work with the Cancer Society, which was really enjoyable and really, really rewarding. And then I did some lecturing with DCU as well. So it gave me a really good opportunities to get out and do lots of different things because I had that flexibility with the various roles. And then in January 2019, no, 2020, sorry, January 2020, the current role that I'm doing now was advertised with Irish Rail. And I applied for it, and took a while to get on board because COVID hit, so there was other priorities. So I started the following November, which is also a very lengthy process, but didn't go on that length of time. It just got paused for a bit with COVID. So yeah, the rest is history. And I think the piece that attracted me to this role was probably because it brought lots of different aspects of my experience previously together. And I suppose it gave me the opportunity to I suppose to lead on the program as well. A lot of the roles, not that there'd been very many up until then, but a lot of the roles that were out there were quite junior, and they didn't have, support, with other functions. Like they were kind of, a lot of companies were hiring a junior person in, but then not having access to make change or influence programs and policies and have budget and things like that. And that for me was like, well, what can you do? I'm just going to get frustrated, too much of a doer. So whereas this program was part of the strategy, there was, really good buy-in. I was interviewed by some of our executive team. So there was, you could feel that real commitment as well. So that was a big selling point. For me as well. So yeah, I'd say the rest is history. And it's nearly 4 years, and that's terrifying. It's flown. But it's all been really good.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, that wasn't a very quick answer. Apologies.
It doesn't need to be. Yeah, that was a really brilliant overview of a varied career that has brought you to where you are today. And I've got lots of questions on that, as I'm sure our viewers do as well. But I'll hold them for a moment, and we might ask Tomas the very same question. The career journey, Tomas, what has brought you to where you are today?
Thank you. Yeah. And Sharon, amazing story. I just want to plus one something you said around telling people that it's easier to tell people you work in finance than it is to say you work in wellbeing. Because I often say psychological health and wellbeing, and people either look at me as if they don't understand me, or I just say, look, I work in HR, and they tend not to get any other questions after that. But yeah, where did my career start? So I'll be honest, from the outset, I didn't think I'd end up in wellbeing. It wasn't on my career goals path, whatever you want to call it. I actually started my career in retail many moons ago. I worked in retail, loved working with customers and making people's day. Um, and I kind of, at that point, early career, thought I wanted a career in sales management. That's the direction that I was probably going in. That quickly changed. So I worked for some big players, Gap, Clarks, Debenhams at the time. And I ended up working for Three, the telco company, mobile company. I started with them in retail and quickly moved into training positions. I had previously worked in training positions in retail in other organizations that I'd worked in. But I realized, okay, there's something in this training, learning and development space that I really liked. And I began to pursue that kind of full time, which brought me to a full time career in HR within Three at the time, where I spent a number of years. From an education perspective, I quickly realized that I had no HR qualifications under my belt. I had a business degree, but nothing specific enough from a HR perspective. So I went on to NCI and did an undergraduate in HR. I was lucky enough to come across a couple of people at that point from Permanent TSB, the Irish Bank, and that's where I think that's one of my pivots from a wellbeing perspective, or particularly from a psychology perspective, where I was lucky enough to look after a early career slash kind of succession planning program for emerging managers within the organization. And I got to work with a role that I'd never heard of before, an organizational psychologist or an occupational psychologist. And the work that they did really interested me because I was interested in the evidence-based approach and looking at research and looking at what we knew about particular interventions and particular approaches in the talent space at that point. So I decided to go on and do a master's in organizational psychology at that point. Did that over in Birkbeck in London. Really enjoyed that program, which fundamentally, if I skip forward, landed me in the trust and safety space. So because of my my training and my master's, I ended up working in trust and safety for Facebook for a number of years. So, yeah, trust and safety, for those who don't know it, is a very unique space. So we're the part of a social media organization that keep the platform safe. So when there's content or interactions on the platform that we don't want to see on the platform, they get either routed by AI or they're user reported, and I look after the teams that then review those escalations. So it's a very, very unique space that I don't think a lot of people know about. But I started in the training space. I was responsible for learning and development for the trust and safety organization at Facebook. And I ended up taking on additional responsibilities around people and programming, which led me to kind of the well-being space. I was lucky enough to be offered a role at TikTok to lead on psych health and wellbeing for trust and safety, which kind of has landed me in the role that I'm in today. I'm at TikTok for the last 3.5 years, really enjoying it. Again, looking after trust and safety. And yeah, just briefly to keep it short, like moving into the wellbeing space, particularly in trust and safety, has offered me huge, unique opportunity. I get to answer the weird and wonderful questions that haven't been answered before in this space. I get to do the right thing by way of protecting people. To be honest, I don't think there's anything else I'd like to be doing at this stage of my career. Yeah, and outside of my day-to-day, it has offered opportunities. So I spent some time in NCI lecturing on their HR programs, looking after academic research for masters and undergraduate students, and spending some time teaching across a number of programs for them as well. So yeah, and sorry, I should have said, from my master's, I decided over the last few years to go on and do a PhD in organizational health and wellbeing. So I'm looking at occupational trauma, which if anybody's interested in that space, reach out to me individually and I can talk about that. Cool, I'll leave it there.
Brilliant. Yeah, fantastic overview again. Another very interesting career. You didn't start out with the intention of being in this space, but is certainly and you're almost, with each role, it's like you're backing it up with a qualification. Maybe you're getting in the role, you're learning, and you're backing it up with a qualification then as well, which is fantastic. So brilliant overview from both of you. I might ask our attendees now. We'd love to make this interactive, so I do have a poll here. So I'd love to get a feel for who's on the call. You should be seeing those questions pop up in front of you. The first two are pretty much true or false. Are you working in this area? That's the first one. The second one is around if you actually have a qualification in this area. That's number 2. Completely anonymous, by the way. Just want to get a feel for who's on the call. And numbers 3 and 4, I think, are interesting. So what aspect of this area interests you the most? And you'll see some options there. There's 5 different options. And here's one and we might follow up on this, is what's your biggest barrier to pursuing a career in workplace wellbeing? And that could be around the lack of information around career paths. That's why it was so interesting to hear what Sharon and Tomas had to say about their own. So I'm just going to give everyone now just a moment or two. I'm seeing lots of replies coming in, which is fantastic. Oh, we're flying in there. We're well over 60%. So a very engaged audience here. We'll give everyone, there's another 30 seconds or so.
Get the countdown clock.
Yeah, that's it. We're approaching 90% here. So this is impressive. So no one is zoned out here. Everyone is focused. We're actually heading for 95%. So I'm going to end it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We've got over 95%. That is fantastic. So thanks everyone for that. Let me just share those results on screen. So you should be able to see them now. 42% are currently in this space. 55% are interested. So that's good. So I'd say that's a strong reason why people are joining the call. In terms of formal qualifications, roughly 50% have one. We've got a good 16%, probably current postgrad students. Hi everyone on the call. What else have we got? So what aspects of workplace wellbeing interest you the most? So maybe no surprise, almost a quarter interested in the mental health support. Up to almost 40% leadership and org culture. Very interesting. Employee engagement is at 28%, only 6% physical well-being. That's so interesting. When I started in this area as well, maybe 10 years ago, I think that was the only consideration. People thought it was just physical activity, a class here and there. And only 6% interested in the policy side. Now, the barriers, 23%, lack of information about career paths. There's a big number, 35% limited job opportunities, and so on. Unclear career progression. I might go to Sharon and Tomas. Give me your thoughts on some of these numbers that you're seeing. Would this kind of resonate with your understanding?
Yeah. Sorry, did you ask me?
Yeah, please.
I mean, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's interesting actually. There's not many people interested in the policy side of things.
Yeah.
But I think the leadership piece is crucial. So it's good to see that there. I think, you can't achieve much without that support and, the organization piece as well. Mental health, not hugely surprising because it's of such great importance. And it is really coming to the fore and having such an impact on everything. In terms of the career, so I can't remember the specific wording. I just closed it so I could see it. The one around career progression and pathways.
Yeah.
I think it's better than it was, but I think it's probably not perfect. There's definitely more opportunities and, more kind of progression pathways. But as I said, I worked in Australia and it was quite phenomenal, the volume of, progression pathways, whether you were in, practice, academia, workplace, like whatever kind of cohort or avenue you took in health and wellbeing, it was quite broad in terms of the many, many layers of career progression, which almost tempted me to stay, but it was too far away, Australia. But yeah, so it's not surprising, but I think things are improving definitely as organizations and governments are seeing the value and the importance of this area. That would be my feeling.
And I mean, Iarnrod Éireann Irish Rail would be a good example of that. So your role, which was you're 4 years now, that was newly created at the time.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about the structure internally there. It's not just yourself. There's a couple of positions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we have a team. So Anne Farrell, who many of you may have met on this call. I know, Brian, obviously you know Anne well. So Anne has been with Irish Rail, the CIE group. I'm not sure how many years, or she'd even want me to say, but quite a few years. And I suppose she was working, in health promotion in the occupational health unit before anybody was really speaking about health promotion, and fighting that corner across, the bus companies and ourselves. And then I suppose as health and wellbeing has come more to the fore, my position was created, and then subsequently Bus Éireann, Dublin Bus, then also had positions and now have managers, health and wellbeing or health promotion managers in those companies. But for ourselves, so January 12 months ago, we hired Jennifer Finlay Mulligan, who works with myself, and she spent some time working on ED&I with Sam, who's our ED&I manager, as well, although most of her time is spent with health and wellbeing. But Jennifer's brilliant, so she joined whatever that is about 1.5 years or so ago, and then we had a new team member join, who's, as you mentioned earlier, she's doing the course with you at the moment. So Aoife Burke, and she joined in the summer. So our team has been expanding, which is fantastic. I mean, there's we're a really busy team. There's more and more demand across the organization for supporting staff health and wellbeing, which is brilliant because, that's the biggest challenge, particularly in, I suppose, a traditional organization like ours. It's 90% men. We've a, average age of, I think it's 48 or 49 at this stage, but I don't know if that's hugely representative saying that number, because actually there's a lot of people that are kind of in that nearly pre-retirement or close to retirement category. And then I think the figures are skewed because there's been a lot of new recruits on our apprentice programs, graduate programs. And then we've had huge recruitment over the last, probably since I joined. I think they really kicked off all of the recruitment around that time. There's a lot of investment in rail for the first time in a long time. So that's changed the demographic slightly as well. But, quite I suppose, a challenging cohort to reach. But I think the value has been seen in the outputs, and the staff engagement is amazing. Like, you can't argue with the numbers, and the so I think that's really helped make us really busy, have a need for more staff.
And the awards as well. CIPD Workplace Wellbeing Award winner last year. So clearly moving in the right direction in terms of engagement and numbers of people on the team now as well, which is great to see. Tomas, your own thoughts there on the survey. Do you think, will a lot of people on the call be disappointed that they'll be spending more than 6% of their time on policy if they were to get a role in this space?
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about policy either, to be honest. But yeah, it's not surprising the mix. Like, it's great to see the emphasis, as Sharon said, on mental health, and that's where a lot of organizations are overly indexing, particularly I think because of the change in reg around psychological health and safety standards that are now required of organizations. So and most importantly, because it's the right thing to do for our people. But yeah, just to echo what you said, Sharon, around the lack of career progression, perceived lack of career progression and pathing in general for wellbeing professionals. And I know we'll probably get to this question over today's conversation, but the question I most get asked is like, how do I get into this space to begin with? Like, I think the answer is like there's 100 different ways. If we look at the different areas of focus, like leadership, organizational culture, mental health, physical health, often organizations focus on a particular area as opposed to well-being holistically, which can be beneficial to people trying to take their first step in this space. But we're definitely behind. I think to your point, Sharon, and just to bring up like the CIPD as an example, if you look at HR career progression maps, like they've been there for a long time. They've been redeveloped. We're quite, as a wellbeing organization, it's been around a while, but we just haven't. We'll get to that point where there will be clearly defined career paths by organizations like the CIPD. What I can share from an internal perspective is, as much as it mightn't be there from an industry perspective, we are doing our best internally to provide clear career paths for wellbeing professionals within TikTok. One way we're doing it is by creating clear competency mapping across different levels and the different roles within the wellbeing team, because we actually have, I think we're quite unique. We have very specialized, very specific roles within the organization. So we have wellbeing program managers that look after our programs and stakeholder engagement and compliance. We have wellbeing specialists who would be psychologists. We have wellbeing content designers who come in with a different background altogether. And we need to create opportunities for people to be able to move either laterally across into different wellbeing roles, up into leadership roles, or across the organization into other similar spaces, like potentially learning and development. So we are doing our best internally, and I'd urge other organizations to consider that as well. But yeah, I think they're my initial thoughts. I'll leave it there.
So again, Tomas, at TikTok, it's not just yourself. There's a team of people, and as you mentioned, now it's like with a range of kind of skill sets there. So, how many people are we talking about, and what are the, like, even for yourself, what is the career progression opportunity? Would it remain in the wellbeing space, or would you be going into potentially a different kind of leadership role potentially?
So I can answer it in a way that'll probably be helpful for everyone on this call. So we're in the high 20s, almost 30 individuals across the team, which is unheard of. We are quite a large organization, but that will tell you how invested we are in mental health and wellbeing in general. Yeah, look, from a progression perspective and our movement, because people often think like, okay, so the leadership piece is there. If you want to step up and lead a team or an organization, those opportunities exist. But like, I'll use myself as an example. I come from a psychology background. I don't come from a physical health background or a health promotion background. So there's a lot of learning still out there for me when it comes to well-being, and moving across our team into maybe leading another team that focus on a different area is an opportunity for me. But specifically, and this kind of comes back to how do I get into well-being? You're asking how can they move out of well-being if they wanted to? I use like learning and development as an example. So we'd have people on my team that specialize in the facilitation of psych health and wellbeing programs. So it's a lot of delivery. It's a lot of, when you look at the core competencies, a lot of training and development, learning, organizational development type competencies. So the natural move there out would be somewhere like training and talent and development, or like learning and development as a team. Likewise, coming into the organization, we have roles currently open on the team, which I can highlight later, that look for some of those core skill sets within this space as well. So I think there's lots of opportunity.
I just popped the open role into the chat there. People can have a look at. And the question there from Jill around, I think you kind of answered this, but and there's another mention of this. Are you looking for HR qualifications? Is it psychology? Or I guess it probably depends on the role. Would it be right in
Right.
saying that? Yeah.
Yeah, there's no straight answer here. So for a specialist position, given the work that we do in trust and safety, for someone who's going to be making intervention or mental health support decisions, we do look for a background in psychology, just around making safe decisions and whatnot. But there's so many other opportunities. So we've wellbeing program managers, and that role is not necessarily a qualification in wellbeing, but somebody who genuinely is passionate about wellbeing, but brings a unique skill set to the team, and that is program management. They do things that psychologists just aren't good at, whether it be stakeholder engagement, project planning, project mapping, keeping us on track. So there are a huge amount of opportunity in that space. And likewise, if we look at the wellbeing delivery lead position that we've opened, so again, I'm not looking for a formal wellbeing qualification. It's a nice to have, obviously, and we're more than happy to support that for an individual that comes onto the team. But we are looking for someone who has an extensive background in organizational development, organizational learning, because we all bring our own strengths, but with that comes our limitations. So this role is open to offer a more robust approach to delivery strategies of wellbeing programs and interventions across the team. So yeah, to answer your question, a HR, learning, talent, OD type background. Yeah.
Okay, very good. And I think the key there, that's a brilliant overview. I think the key is just to look at the job description, have a look at what the organization is looking for. Even within the one organization, there could be different requirements, different competencies being looked for. I know there's a very recent Meta role, you may have seen, a wellness response partner, and that was called out. They were looking for 12 years of clinical psychology experience. So that's not going to be for everybody, of course, but there are other roles like we've just shared there. Sharon, yourself, I mean, I know you did an open role very recently, and there's potential maybe for expanding the team in the future. Does it depend
on my manager watching this?
Does it depend on the role, that the kind of skills and competencies you're looking for?
It'll depend on the role. I mean, look, we're a small team, very small in comparison to Tomás. And I wrote down 20 people because I'm always looking for benchmarking against other organizations about the size of their wellbeing teams. So it's always good to get the numbers. Yeah, look, it depends how things go along. Because we're a small team, we need to we don't have, I suppose, the luxury of having, hugely deep specialties and lots of different areas. We need to be able to do a bit of everything. Now, having said that, Jennifer on the team is a nutritionist, and Aoife has a background in working with mental health. So, we do still have psychologists, but we do still have strength in different areas, even though the team, each person can get involved in bits and pieces of everything. As I said, we're a small team, so we need to be able to be flexible that way. So for now, but again, look, it depends what way things move forward. If we do get any more staff, I think I'm not asking at the moment. We'll believe we've only just got Aoife in recently, so it's maybe the new year. We'll see.
Very good. And am I right in saying, Sharon, I know you on the postgrad, a lot of students that are on the call will be aware of this, but we certainly approach workplace wellbeing from the same lens as the WHO. And the adoption of Healthy Ireland have adopted the 4 avenues of influence then as well: the psychosocial work environment, the physical work environment, the communities, and then the personal health resources. I think, is that something you're using as a bit of a template internally? Is that a bit of stress? It sounds like Tomás is mostly focused on the psychosocial work environment, certainly for now. Are you looking at it in kind of the broader lens, the 4 avenues?
Yeah, in terms of the organization, sorry, not to do with jobs, you mean in terms of the organization part? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're working across the different areas now. Obviously, some of the areas are slower moving than others, and we've more control over things like the the personal resources and skills development than we do in the actual environment. But we are knocking on doors and engaging with different functions around the organisation to bring up the subject of health and wellbeing for consideration. So like there's, even in terms of physical work environment, there's a lot of growth in Irish Rail, so a lot of new buildings or upgrades and things like that. So there have been improvements in provisions for, I mean, even like one of our locations down in Galway, they now have like a quiet room, which would be unheard of previously. A nice big open shared space for canteen. They have a few benches outside, a little garden kind of area for staff. So some simple things like that have been brought in, and again, really endorsed by staff and local health and wellbeing champions. Up in Inchicore, there's been like a sustainability and wellbeing garden developed. So some of the environmental stuff has been brought into the fore a bit more. And absolutely, the other quadrants are been, I suppose we're chipping away at them is probably the best way, but we are following that framework. Yes.
Excellent. So is that something, is that a future? Do you see, like, is that a trend? Well, hopefully not just a trend, but something we're more likely to see organizations adopting that kind of structure. I think a real challenge for workplace wellbeing, workplace health promotion has been to date that there has been no structure. It has been just random acts of wellness. But I mean, if every organization were to adopt these four kind of avenues as their kind of linchpins, that would provide the structure, I think, that is badly needed.
Absolutely. Well, it's an evidence-based approach, and it just gives that extra weight and legitimacy, to what we're doing. We're not, as you say, doing random acts of well-being, or it's tokenistic or fluffy stuff. There's real rationale behind it. And actually, I was only on a call with a manager earlier this morning, and I was speaking about Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're having, in conjunction with our health and wellbeing champions around the country, hosting coffee mornings. So the coffee morning sounds like something quite fluffy, but because so much research has come out around the importance of social connection and mental health, this is actually a really, really important piece of work, even though it might seem like, light or fluffy. It's a really important piece. I think, given the environments that we're in and the speed of life and, technology and everything, we're not connecting with human beings as much or as naturally as we might have before. So, yeah, absolutely. It's really important to have that solid backbone. And I mean, anytime I'm particularly meeting a new group, I'll, put the framework up and talk through it, to kind of give it that weight. So we're not making this up as we're going along. There is like backing. This is a whole area of work, it's there's a lot behind it.
Brilliant. Yeah. What are your own thoughts, Tomas? Are you entirely focused on the psychosocial work environment? Because I know in your time at Facebook Meta, you were heavily involved in the communities, the internal communities there.
Yeah. So our team, we overinvest in psychosocial because as we have the luxury of other teams that look after the other key areas like physical, like organizational culture and leadership and stuff. So our team, just given the work that we do and who we look after, we are overly invested and focused on the psychosocial piece at the minute, for obvious reasons. But it's funny, Sharon, that you mentioned the importance of peer support at coffee mornings. So it's an area that we're actually looking at the minute. So wellbeing cafes, there's a lot of emerging evidence actually in that space, just around how beneficial a simple intervention like that can actually be when you put a tiny bit of structure around it. But like I said, we're focused on mental health primarily. But we have other teams within the organization that look after the other kind of key areas. One thing that I do want to highlight, and I suppose it's important, especially for anyone studying in this space, is regulation. I think at the minute we're under-regulated as a wellbeing industry. Australia's way ahead of us. If you want to use somebody as an example, go to Australia. But I welcome further regulation, like for any policymakers out there in this country, the Health and Safety Authority, etc. Like we're looking forward to seeing some rigor and some more guidance around what we can be doing better and what they expect. I think that will help to push us forward.
I agree 100% there. And I'm actually speaking at an event on Friday where the head of the HSA is there. So I'm hoping to get a few minutes of his time maybe to get an update on that. Because I think you hinted at this earlier, Tomas, but I mean, the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act has been around since 2005. It's in its second incarnation. But I think it's fair to say that has been focused on physical hazards up until this point. But I definitely welcome the HSA statement at the beginning of this year, where they said they're going to be focused, prioritize psychosocial hazards in the workplace. So is that something that will make you and your leadership team there, sit up and take notice in that, look, this is almost a legal requirement now. We could be audited on this. We need to be tracking this closely. Is that kind of how you're approaching it? I mean, you were doing this already, but is this maybe even giving it extra kind of scrutiny?
Yeah, I think, look, from an organizational perspective, it's clear with our team size how invested we are. I think we're just looking for clarity as an organization, and use it almost like a gap analysis. What else can we be doing, or what are we not doing that we need to be focused more on? I think that will benefit most from it is the smaller organizations, because it's easier. Like Sharon, you mentioned it, when it's a smaller team and you don't have deeper specialisms. It's easier to achieve things when there's a clear guidance in front of you that you can work against. So yeah, I am looking forward to that, in fairness.
Very good. Sharon, is it a driver for you? I mean, a strong health and safety culture at Iarnrod Éireann already, of course. Was this
Policies are always helpful, particularly in a big organization, because you can only get so much done. It's like voluntary codes and things like that. Like the policies really do help, and the legislation, I think it's definitely welcomed. I mean, look, there's a lot of support. We are doing a lot, and a lot more than was been done before, but there's always room. And I think if there is the regulatory body and an audit process, it makes a difference. I mean, even this year, which was the first time actually, so we obviously get audited on various safety things, from the HSA and others. And actually, I had some queries came to me on the back of the audit, which I was delighted, right? Because obviously the answers, we were doing stuff, but it was amazing that it was thought of and it was included and it was part of it, because it makes the functional areas that are directly responsible for it sit up and engage more as well and take it seriously. So I think it's helpful generally.
Excellent.
Although I suppose there's always be careful what you wish for. But no, I think generally it's a positive thing.
Definitely. So a couple of questions coming in. I think I've got to most of them. Maybe on the chat there, if anyone has a question, please do pop it into the chat for Tomas or for Sharon. Guys, if you were to step back and if you were starting out, actually, let's say approach it this way. If you were starting out now and you were interested in this space, like everyone on the call is, what would you be thinking? What would you be doing? How would you be looking to, is it educate yourself or gain some skills? Any thoughts on that, Tomas?
I'm going to plug the postgrad maternity program for you, Brian.
Wow, thank you. Oversubscribed.
That's what he was really hinting at.
Yeah, I actually wrote a couple of points down on this one, because it's a question, honestly, that I get asked a lot. Anytime I have any form of like career conversation with somebody, it always comes up for obvious reasons. Yeah, look, let's be honest. There are well-being, as you said, jobs out there that require a lot of experience or tons of qualifications or a lot of years, and you mentioned one of them today. And that can seem overwhelming and kind of unachievable. I think looking at it, particularly if you haven't worked in this space before, what can you actually achieve? You mentioned this, but working in ERGs, so employee resource groups within organizations, has helped me like massively from a well-being perspective. I ended up working when I was at Meta, supporting an employee resource group that was focused on people with disabilities, and we had three key pillars. One was neurodiversity, one was mental health, and the other one was physical and accessibility. So I was able to get a lot of experience, real practical experience, without having worked directly in the wellbeing space there. So I suppose my point would be, look to enrich your role. So if you're in an organization at the minute, how can you get involved in things like ERGs or other networks within the organization that focus? And if they don't exist, why not start one? A mental health ERG or an ERG that's focused on well-being, fantastic idea in any organization. And if you're in something like a HR type role or a people-focused role, or if you're just a team leader or a people manager, enrich your role. What opportunities can you take on in your current position to increase your exposure to organizational well-being, organizational practice, well-being practices within organizations, just to build up
Yeah.
that experience. Because honestly, just from doing interviews, the most practical examples I get from people are people that are on the ground frontline, like are in the organization and are able to feed back the actual like well-being needs of our populations. So that's kind of the one area. The other running areas outside of an organization, if that's not possible, look to other organizations. Like, can you join a charity? Can you sit on a board for, a mental health focused organization and try and get some experience that way as well?
And exposure and build relationships as well.
Yeah.
Great advice. And I love the ERG example there. I mean, the employee resource groups, for those that are not familiar. And I know at least two health and wellbeing leads in Irish organizations, to very large organizations, that their background was not in HR, was not in wellbeing, but pretty much thanks to their involvement with wellbeing champion networks, they have found their way, through interview process and all that, but to be the wellbeing leads in their organization. But their foot in the door and their exposure and their experience was effectively thanks to their involvement in with those champion networks. So that was really important. Thanks, Tomas. Sharon.
Yeah, I don't really have anything further to add. I mean, I think that kind of covers all the different pointers for people. I think get experience is basically what Tomas is saying, I think, in whatever way that comes. I think, like you say, I like that term, enriching your role. I think it's a good one. But I think, if it's not internal, externally, for myself, because there weren't any specific health promotion jobs really around when I started. I was creative, so I worked with the National Transport Authority on a program that was around behaviour change. So it wasn't a health promotion role. I ended up, doing the comms and project managing. But then on the side, I was doing workshops. I did the trainer qualification and loads of other bits and pieces. And I think, go with where you're passionate as well. So I loved being with people and getting that sense of, I suppose, fulfillment from, people, achieving things for themselves, but with your facilitation. And I suppose I love that people are telling you this worked, it was great, and you're having that impact. But I think find what you enjoy and do as much of it as you can and get as much experience and exposure in whatever way that is. And there's always people looking for support and help, whether it's internal or external. You'd be surprised if it turns you away.
And very good point, Sharon. Let me just make sure everyone's on mute. Very good point there in terms of find your passion or something you're interested in. But I think, actually having a real niche interest could be your superpower. I'm seeing one example is, I think it's Breda in the chat here talking about the menopause piece, a real interest of hers clearly. So is there a qualification you can do in that space? There's certainly opportunity within organizations to create, is it, a women at work group or even a very specific dedicated menopause piece. There's policy development happening in a lot of organizations around menopause. So, that's a potential option using that kind of route, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, find your passion and go with it. I mean, we've done some work around menopause, and surprising, maybe at the start, we had some men in the room, and that's what we're targeting now going forward, is to make sure we have, a proportional number of men, because as a male-dominated organization, you can't support menopause with just the women in the room because they have to work with the men in the room. So there needs to be that, that wider understanding. And actually, quite amazingly, the last while I mentioned that we go out to meet our night workers and quite regularly and support them, and we deliver workshops to them. And myself and Anne Farrell, who I mentioned earlier on, were out with one of the first groups earlier this year. And we had just been given some of Mental Health Ireland's new menopause booklets. Anne had been at the launch, and we had them in the car, and we threw them into the table with all the goodies, the refreshments and everything like that. And at the end of the session, there was about 20, 25 men in the room, and one guy came up and said, "Do you have any more of those menopause booklets?" It's like, where did they all go? I mean, it was actually really surprising given the group that we had in the cohort, but we've brought them to every session since, and they've been taken. And actually, Anne was in I'm trying to remember, one of our depots recently, and they asked, could she do a workshop around menopause? And it's all for the men. They want to understand and know more. So it's a really growing area, and it's really important. Like we have a piece now we've linked in with Menopause Hub, and any of our female colleagues who are experiencing severe menopause symptoms can be referred to the Menopause Hub through Anne. She's in OC Health, and get support there with their consultants. So we're trying to do our bit in that space as well, but it's more and more important. But again, there's so many different areas. Like we support family carers, we link with Family Carers Ireland. Like there's a variety of different things because we've such a varied group of staff, such a diverse group.
Very good. Yeah. And Radina was just talking about the importance of maybe volunteering as well, associations, communities. That would be really helpful. So something in your own, maybe in your local community. I'm just looking at a couple of questions. If we finish with a couple of questions, if that's okay, from the audience. I think Michelle talking about diverse skill set. What aspects are needed? Actually, we kind of answered that maybe with the niche piece. So we've maybe touched on that. So absolutely, I think rather than a broad skill set is always very useful. But I think you might get more attention if you just niche down on is there a particular area that you're interested in and really passionate about learning about and getting involved in. So that could be your superpower. Sive is asking a question. Any advice for a recent psychology graduate that wants to get into a wellbeing health promotion role, where to get started?
Tomas has a few open jobs.
And maybe related to this, and my final question will be around, I think, in the past, it's probably fair to say these well-being health promotion roles were actually not really well paid. So you might have been, if you were in an organization, you might have had to take a pay cut to take up one of these roles. I'm hoping that's changing. I'm certainly seeing some of in the tech companies, certainly there's a lot of that wellness response partner role I mentioned was a significant salary. So I'm hoping that is changing. And I'm also hoping that the well-being roles are being elevated in terms of their grade or their bands. And I am seeing that. It's slow progress, but you might maybe both comment on that.
Yeah, quickly, I agree. And there has been a shift, thankfully, which is like a good barometer for organizational investment in general. Where let's be frank though, if you're coming in from a very senior, and it's happened before, a very, very senior leadership position in another industry, and you want to move from that industry into wellbeing, like there's a reality of that. But overall, there has been a positive shift from my perspective anyway. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, I suppose because there are more senior roles out there as well. So I suppose as I said earlier, I never planned to be self-employed, but the only options for me at that point in terms of employee jobs were very junior, as in kind of entry level. So it wasn't an option at that point. But then, now there are more senior roles available. So there is, obviously better salaries available out there. I think there's probably still more work to do, maybe as businesses see the benefit. I think we're still early enough in the game that some organizations get it, others think it's the right thing to do, but maybe don't fully understand the real benefit there, and the impact on organization culture. Like that's one piece that has come out. And again, it's anecdotal, which is quite challenging sometimes when it's anecdotal as opposed to hard facts, but difficult to measure a lot of these things. But like we've one of our workshops, which I'm trying to remember how many people they're in it, but quite a few people. And we have 2 health and wellbeing champions in there. And when they started off first, one of the guys was on his own health transformation journey. And he said to me, I remember chatting away to him one day, and he said, "Oh, I'm getting so much slack from the lads because I'm not going down to the shop and getting breakfast rolls and bringing in my lunch, blah, blah." Anyway, turned the tables. A year and a half later, they're like hosting our annual conference in their workshop, out, pulling chairs, bringing in furniture, scrubbing the place, like actively involved. And like the guys themselves, when they come in to work at like whatever time it is, it's 6 or 7 in the morning, they sit down and have a cup of tea together and have a chat. And the odd time there's a guy there who's really into yoga, and a few of them would do yoga out in the garden outside. Like, I mean, but totally culture change within the group themselves. That was all peer led, which is amazing. Like, their manager got up and spoke at one of our events, which was totally unplanned. But I was like, oh my God, are we capturing this on camera? It's amazing. And speaking about how within the work site, like the day job, like it's changed how people are interacting with each other, because they've been able to open up and share when there's been difficult days, things happening at home. And, you know, as opposed to somebody maybe, you know, not being friendly or snapping in terms of their work, they're actually understanding each other a lot more because they're having that social connection. And I suppose it's that freedom to be open and speak. So I think, you know, wellbeing can impact culture in a positive way, and that's a huge benefit to an organization as well. But it's difficult to measure and and show as well. But I think once that value is seen for probably a little bit longer over time, it'll elevate, I think, the functions and, you know, give them, you know, more weight as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, well said. And I think to your earlier point, I do think we are very early in this game, in this workplace wellbeing in Ireland, certainly, and indeed globally. And I'm going to be speaking to that as a health and safety conference on Friday. And what I'll be saying to the health and safety professionals in the room is, you know, I feel from a workplace wellbeing perspective, we are exactly where the health and safety profession was 30 years ago. We had the early shoots of legislation. We had a couple of early adopters in government, certainly, but the odd early adopter firm. But we had plenty of pushback, plenty of resistance, not enough compliance and legislation. People say I'm not wearing that hard hat on site, and all of this kind of pushback. Whereas I don't think anybody would question, you know, the health and safety profession now, and it's part of, you know, everyone's responsibility, if you like. There's very much clear dedicated roles and teams and organizations. So I think that's where we are, and I think it's an exciting time to be involved in this space. I think there are going to be more opportunities out there. So find your niche, find what you're interested in, educate yourself, go to events, build up your networks, join community groups and ERGs. And I think, you know, really good things will happen when you put yourself out there.
Yeah, I think the networking piece is really important. I mean, this whole area and the networks have grown over the last number of years, but I know when I started out first, I mean, people look out for each other. I don't know how a couple of people over time, they're like, oh, did you hear this job? Or, you know, they'd be sharing and connecting. And I think it's a really lovely thing that in Ireland we're quite good at looking out for each other. And that connection piece is really important. So yeah, definitely get out to some of Brian's events. There you go, Brian.
Cool. Well, I just want to say a big thank you to yourself, Sharon, for joining us and giving up your time and sharing so much, and to Tomas as well. I know how busy you guys are, so look, I really appreciate you taking the time to share, just to give back and to share with everyone today. It's really, really appreciated. I'm guessing people can go to LinkedIn if they'd like to reach out and connect. Would that be the best way to go? Yeah.
There's a couple of messages coming in there directly. So for anyone who has messaged me, just add me on LinkedIn and I'll follow up there. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. And listen, thanks everyone. I want to say thank you again. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'm going to hang on the line. If anyone's a question or two for me, I'd be happy to chat